We are right at the top of the hour, so let's go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Devin. I'm a manager in the Program and Health Equity Department here at the Cancer Support Community. I'm so grateful to be here with you all today. Welcome to our Community Health Worker Peer Support Forum on navigating trauma and grief with people impacted by cancer, featuring our expert speaker, Dr. Tanikka Price. The CHW Peer Support Forum live event series is brought to you through the Cancer Support Community's Community Health Worker Oncology Focused Training Program. The Community Health Worker, or CHW program for short, is focused on providing education and support to community health workers who work with people impacted by or living with cancer. In our series of CHW peer support forums, expert speakers cover important topics in oncology patient navigation as it relates to the important work that CHWs do every day. The expert speaker presentations are then followed by an interactive Q&A session and peer discussion. Along with this CHW Peer Support Forum event series, the Cancer Support Community is supporting the work of CHWs with our brand new CHW Quick Guides, which are quick access digital and printed tools that CHWs can use in the field while working with people impacted by cancer. You can access and download the CHW Quick Guides on our website, and that link will be dropped into the chat momentarily. Now, for a couple of quick housekeeping items, if you would like to ask a question during the presentation, please do so using the Q&A feature in Zoom. Questions will be addressed at the end of the presentation today. To turn on closed captions, please click on the CC button down in your Zoom toolbar. Okay. Awesome. And then for those of you who are joining a Cancer Support Community event for the first time today, I'd like to take a brief moment just to tell you a little bit about the Cancer Support Community. For more than 40 years, we at CSC have been relentless allies for anyone impacted by cancer. We help individuals manage the realities of this disruptive disease and get back to their version of normal. Whether you're accessing our free services in person at one of our 196 locations across the globe, online, or via our toll-free cancer support helpline, you are getting a team of licensed professionals providing patient navigation, financial counseling, genetic counseling, pediatric support, and so much more. Now, without further ado, let me officially welcome you all to today's CHW Peer Support Forum. Today's topic is navigating trauma and grief with people impacted by cancer. I am extremely grateful to have with us today our guest speaker, Dr. Tanikka Price, who will share her wisdom and help us all better understand how community health workers can play a vital role in navigating trauma and grief with people impacted by cancer. Dr. Tanikka Price uses her training as a lawyer, her passion as a motivational speaker, and the knowledge that she gained during her doctoral training at North Central University to develop curriculum to educate and train others in caring for and taking responsibility for their own health and healing. Dr. Price is currently the Chief Education Officer at the Health Impact Ohio. For over a decade, in addition to being a family law attorney, she has developed and taught learning topics for pregnant women and community health workers in at-risk communities in Columbus, Ohio. She was inspired to educate following the birth of her premature twins. She uses narrative and trauma-informed care to meet people where they are and empower them to change. Tanikka is a mother of 6 and Mimi to 3 grandchildren. She earned a doctorate in education in May of 2021, researching the effects of adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, on African American women and educational attainment at North Central University. She also has an American culture degree from Vassar College and a law degree from Capital University Law School. She is a member of St. Mount Zion Missionary Baptist Church and the Columbus Bar Association and the Ohio Bar. Tanikka, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your immense wisdom and expertise with our attendees here. Without further ado, I'd love to hand off the mic to Dr. Price.
Thank you. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. Thank you for inviting me here today. It's my pleasure to be here to speak about a topic that has really impacted my own personal life. If you know anything about ACEs, I do have an ACE score of 7. So I call that my anti-resume, right? Devin read all the things that are on my resume, and I'm really proud of those. But what you don't see are the experiences that I had that led up to all of this great work that I've been able to do in the community. We're going to talk today, center our conversation around adverse childhood experiences. This is a pictogram, a pretty new pictogram of adverse childhood experiences, along with adverse community environments. This looks at the total picture of things that people could go through between the ages of 0 and 18 that unfortunately most often lead to poor mental and physical health outcomes. Okay. So we are thinking of things that have happened in the household and in the community environments that again lead people on a path that unfortunately, more often than not, if anybody has an A score of 4 or above, they are more likely to have adverse health and mental health outcomes. So we're looking at maternal depression in the home, emotional and sexual abuse, substance abuse in the home. So that means somebody in the house is abusing drugs, domestic violence in the home, physical and emotional neglect, parties, parents being divorced. And I'll also add, because of the research that I found, having parents that were never married or never together or separated, who never were divorced. Mental illness by a parent or someone in the home, incarceration by a parent or someone in the home, and then experiencing homelessness. And then on the bottom, you see adverse community environments such as poverty, discrimination, community disruption, lack of opportunity, economic mobility, and social capital, poor housing quality and affordability, and violence. So there are three main categories of ACEs. It is abuse, which is physical, emotional, and sexual abuse, neglect, which is physical and emotional neglect, and then household dysfunction, which is mental illness, incarcerated relative, mother treated violently, substance abuse, or divorce. So what the researchers who created the ACEs study found is there's not necessarily one form of an ACE that is worse than another. That was the first thing that I learned in my research that I thought was unique. It's not worse if you're physically abused over being physically neglected. It's not worse if your mother had mental illness than if you were sexually assaulted. There also is no dose response to ACEs. In other words, everybody who has 4 or more ACEs has the same chance of having negative outcomes. It's not like if you have 4, you're better than if you have 5. If you have 5, you're better than if you have 10. Researchers don't really understand this mechanism of how ACEs work. It just seems like people that have 0, 1, 2, or 3, they are more likely to have positive outcomes. They're more likely not to have some of these negative outcomes. And people who have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 are more likely to have negative mental and physical outcomes. Okay, we're not really sure why or how that works. So again, the ACE questionnaire, it measures traumatizing experiences from the age of 0 to 18 years of age. And again, the score of 4 or more is associated with adverse mental and physical health consequences. And these are the people who started the study, Drs. Folletti and Dr. Larkin. The reason why they started this study is because they were treating people with obesity, and they would help people lose weight, and those people would come back and they would have gained all the weight back and sometimes even more. And the doctors were really perplexed about this. What was going on? These people knew what to do, they knew what to eat, they knew how to work out. But in all of their cases, there was a trigger, something that happened that forced them, that's how they felt, forced them to go back to their poor eating habits. Okay. And so they wanted to study what that was. And when they started to have conversations with these individuals, the individuals started to talk about their childhood trauma. Now, these doctors didn't set out to study childhood trauma. They didn't even know there was a link between the obesity and the chronic health diseases and the childhood trauma. This was uncovered through these conversations that they were having with individuals about, why did you put the weight back on? Why did you stop working out? Why did you start back eating these comfort foods? Right. And so they began to study, and that is where the ACE questionnaire was developed. These are things that were studied before, right? Sexual trauma was studied before, physical abuse was studied before, neglect was studied before, but no one had ever compiled them into one questionnaire to be able to look at the totality of things that people experience from 0 to 18 years of age until Doctors Folletti and Larkin did this. This is one of the things that I love to teach people about because this was an aha moment for me in my research. And that is what this first sentence says: stress is not bad. Now, when's the last time you talked about positive stress? I don't talk about it other than when I'm presenting, right? But there are many things that have happened in our life that create positive stress. I had positive stress waiting backstage to come out and be presented to you all because this is my first time using Zoom in this format. I love it, but it was a little bit stressful waiting to come out, right? We're never meant to endure prolonged activations of stress. Our bodies are just not built that way. We're only supposed to experience tolerable or toxic stress a few times in our life. So let's look at these stages of stress. Positive stress is brief increases in your heart rate, mild elevations in the stress hormone level. Again, it could be coming out to meet somebody, right? Going out on a first date, responding to a text as I am now while I'm presenting, right? My son's like, am I riding the bus after I already told him to ride the bus? These are things that give you positive, brief increases in heart rate so that you're able to juggle, you're able to manage, you get mild elevations in your stress hormone levels, but you go right back. You go right back to how you felt before that happened. I know you got a live example. Tolerable is serious but temporary stress responses that are buffered, thank you guys, by supportive relationships. Okay. So the quintessential example of this is if you were growing up and you experienced the loss of a grandparent. It was extreme, it was dramatic, it was traumatic, but you had parents, hopefully, that walked alongside you, that supported you, that loved you, that told you everything was going to be okay, and you were able to recover from that stress. Okay. What we want to do after stress is recover. We want our heart rate to go back to normal. We want our hormone levels to go back to normal. What we're talking about when we think about ACEs are toxic stress. Okay. This is prolonged activation of the stress response system in the absence of protective relationships. So I want you to think about the fact that our parents are there supposedly to support us, to love us unconditionally, to walk us through, to be responsive when we text, right? But what happens when our parents are the ones inflicting the harm on us? Or what happens when it's our parents' drug use that opens the door to us being sexually assaulted? What happens when a parent or a coach or someone who is supposed to be there to protect us, a teacher, sexually assaults us? We have the activation of a stress response system in the absence of a protective relationship. As adults, we can see this when we have a bad relationship with our boss and we go into work every day afraid that we're going to be fired. Or maybe we're on a PIP and we're trying not to mess up again. It's day after day after day of that stress. Okay. I remember driving to law school every single day for a whole semester, quarter. I don't remember what we were on. I cried every day. I mean, it was so stressful and so toxic. And my mentor just told me, you can't drop out. You got to just keep going. But I promise you, that was one of the worst emotionally stressful times in my entire life. Okay. And there was an absence of protective relationships. So this toxic stress does damage to our bodies, our minds, and our spirits. And we're going to talk about why next in my wonderful bear story. So I want you to imagine that you are walking and you are foraging for wild berries. This is your ancestors, okay? So you in time before, and you have not a care in the world. You know, when you look for food, it just appears on trees, and you're feeling the breeze. It's a wonderful day here in Central Ohio. So imagine it's one of these nice, beautiful, unfortunately too rare days, and all of a sudden a bear jumps out. When that bear jumps out, I want you to imagine how your body feels. You might breathe in like that and stop breathing. Your hands may start to sweat. Your heart may start to palpitate. In a split second, your brain is trying to decide, what do we do to survive? How do we survive this encounter with the bear? And let me tell you something, your brain doesn't have time for you to consciously think, oh, you know what? I could pick up my phone and I could Google how. Well, this was back in the day, so I guess we couldn't Google, but just go with me, okay? We're time traveling here. Google, how do I walk away from this interaction with the bear? We don't have time for that. So what happens is your mind is making split second decisions. Okay. This is happening because of the adrenaline rush and the hormone level. Your brain says, we don't have time to think, we got to act. And so there are four things that our brain thinks about doing: fleeing. Can we outrun the bear? Fighting. How would I measure up in a fight against the bear? Let me see. How tall is he? How tall am I? How wide? I could freeze. Maybe if I stand really, really still, the bear won't even see me. It'll think I'm a tree. Or we can do what I would do, and that is fawn. Hey, bear, what's up? You know what? We kind of look alike. Maybe we're cousins. We're both brown. I'm a little furry. We got big noses. You know, a little bit of meat on my bones. Bear, you don't want to eat me. You and I are here. That's what I would do. I would fawn the bear. I would talk him to death. He'd be like, "Oh, girl, I want to eat you." Okay. So those are the four things that our body tries to decide what to do in that split second reaction that we have with the bear. The other thing that happens is our brain takes a panoramic picture using all of our senses of everything that we are seeing, tasting, feeling, hearing. What did I leave out? Smelling when the bear jumps out. And we'll talk about why that is in just a second. So I'm trying to decide which one of the four F's to do. My brain is taking a panoramic picture, and I'm trying to figure out how to survive this encounter with the bear. Now, mind you, this was supposed to happen once or maybe twice in our entire lives. What happens when you live with the bear? What happens when you're married to the bear? What happens when the bear is your father? What happens when the bear is your mother? What happens when the bear is your boss? What happens when your bear is your boyfriend or your girlfriend? What happens when the bear is your pastor or your priest or your imam or your rabbi? That is when that feeling that you had when you could not even breathe, when that bear jumped out, you experienced that over and over and over and over again. Our bodies were not built to withstand that type of weathering. Okay. So why does our brain take that panoramic picture when we are exposed to a traumatic situation? Our brains are so advanced that this is something that researchers are just now finding out about. Our brain takes a panoramic picture. We can even remember what the leaves looked like on that day when we encountered the bear. We can remember the smell in the air when we encountered the bear. We can remember how our feet felt in those boots that we wore when we encountered the bear. Why does our brain take a panoramic picture when we are exposed to our traumatic situation? Well, I'll tell you why. It is so that if we are walking down this street this time next year and we see a leaf glistening in the sun and we smell that faint smell of berry and we feel our boots in our feet in our boots a certain way, the hair on the back of our neck will start to stand up and we will immediately be on guard. Now, again, this isn't conscious. We may not remember that this is the exact location where the bear jumped out. But everybody has heard of this book, Our Body Keeps Score. Okay? So our DNA is literally changed when we encounter trauma. And that experience, that event is encoded into our DNA. This is called epigenetics. And the next time we're in that same situation, we will be forewarned. Now, what we know now that we didn't know before is that DNA is passed on to our children and our children's children. How do they know this? Because there was a couple who was on a train in Germany. They were enjoying the countryside, looking out the window at the train. When all of a sudden someone came on the announcement, and they said, that's my German accent. And these two people panicked and jumped off the train. Now, they were researchers, they were smart. They said what just happened to us was not logical. We don't know where we are. We've never been to Germany before. We have no experience in Germany. Why did we just panic? Well, what the announcer came on and said was 3 stops and we'll be at Auschwitz. What their brains did was react to a circumstance and situation that they had never been in, but their parents had. Their parents were Holocaust survivors. So they had a trauma response, or what we call now trigger. They were triggered by an experience that they had never had. It had been, and that's how we know that these experiences are encoded and passed down from generation to generation. If I get stopped by a cop today, I'm in panic mode. I've never had a bad interaction with the cop. I've never been thrown up against a car. I've never been illegally stopped and searched. However, I go into full panic mode when I see a cop behind me. That's relevant because the entire police system was created in a period of enslavement. The badges, sometimes the little things they wear across here, the horses, the uniforms are all the same. You can Google, you can look it up. So, am I responding to a trauma experience from someone in my past? Because it's not me. I haven't had any bad experiences with police. Okay. So, these are the kind of things that research is just figuring out about epigenetics and how trauma is passed down. The reason why we believe that these experiences are encoded and why they're passed down in our DNA is, guess what? It's to protect our offspring. If my baby is walking down this path and it sees the leaves glistening and it smells the berries, guess what? My baby is now alerted that, you know what? I need to be on guard. They don't know why. They don't know mama had to fight a bear. But my DNA changed to protect my offspring. I wish I could see y'all's faces because this is so deep. Isn't this deep? Okay. What happens after the experience of trauma? Okay. What happens after the experience? We survived the bear. We live to fight another bear. We live to fight another day. What happens? A lot of people get stuck in the 4 F's. What does that look like on an everyday basis? A fighter has anger outbursts, can become controlling, becomes the bully. I'm going to get them before they get me. I'll never get got like that again. They could have explosive behaviors, and in extreme cases, they could develop narcissistic personality disorder. People who choose flight could be workaholics, so they don't have to come home and deal with their issues. They could become overthinkers, paralysis of analysis. They could develop anxiety, panic, or OCD, trying to control everything. They may have a difficulty sitting still because their body is literally always trying to run, and they are commonly perfectionists. So flight people do very well. They don't have the kind of red flags that fighters. Fighters are going to have problems with the cops. They're going to have problems in relationships. The fighters are usually obvious. People who use flight, not so much. Okay. These are your perfectionists. These are the people pleasers. Okay. Freeze is difficulty making decisions, feeling stuck. It could lead in extreme cases to disassociation. People may be isolating or numb. And then the fawn, which is where I tend to reside. Fawn people are always reading the room. Okay. They're always feeling everybody out. They're always trying to figure out where the next threat is going to come from. They can, in extreme cases, have a lack of identity because fawners tend to change based on the environment. That's what they've done to survive. Fawners commonly have no boundaries. They give of themselves because when they were growing up, they learned that that's how you survive, right? It's by giving everything. They don't know how to put themselves first. They're very poor at self-care. They're always taking care of everybody else. So the helper professions are full of fawners and fighters. Okay. But what that leads to is a feeling of being overwhelmed because they're not putting themselves first and they're not taking care of themselves. And then fawners can also be codependent because there is a fear of being alone. There is a fear of being abandoned. Okay. Yes, you can be in more than one group. Yes, Rojas. You can be in more than one group because different environments may call on you to react differently. Okay. So growing up in school, I was a fighter. In relationships, I've often been a fleer. I have had extreme situations where I froze. It's uncommon for me to freeze, but I have froze before. I know what that feels like, just not knowing what the heck to do. And then, like I said, my drug of choice in this case is fawning because fawners are likable. You know, people who use jokes a lot, people who use humor a lot are probably fawners because if we can make you laugh, we can disarm you, you know? So I think fawning is the most recent one to be added because I think it probably was the hardest one for people to identify. But again, it can lead to being overwhelmed and being codependent. Now, some of this is just personality type, right? Hey Sierra. Yes. Some of this is personality type. So it's not always a trauma response. You know, I would have the gift of gab even if I didn't have a 7A score, right? So I would be a talker regardless. But what happens is when it becomes to your detriment, when you're doing this and you're not feeling good about this, right? When you're doing it and you don't even know why you're doing it. Most of the time, people don't want to freeze. They want to make decisions. They want to move their life forward. They don't want to disassociate. Okay. People don't want to be the angry person. They don't want to walk around, being a bully. Okay. So, yes. Yes. Hey, Sonia, good to see you. Okay, so this is the actual ACE questionnaire. This is what it looks like when we give it to people. If you've ever seen it, I'm going to make sure that you all get an ACE questionnaire, and you're not only going to get the questionnaire, you're going to get a virtual that walks you through the answers and that gives you some tools to be able to use if you have yes answers. So the way that it works is you get a 1 for every yes, and that's how you get your score. There is a question that I often bring up, and I tell you that I have problems with, and that is, did an adult or a person, this is number 3, did an adult or person at least 5 years older than you ever touch or fondle you or have you touch their body in a sexual way or try to actually have oral, anal, or vaginal sex with you? I was sexually assaulted by a cousin who was the same age as I was, and we were both 4. So I would technically answer yes, except that is where all my trauma started. Okay. So I know for myself that 5-year age thing, and what they tried to do is they tried to differentiate between same sex, playing or, playing house or, the kind of things that are normal and not necessarily sexual assault. But I think that they were, I mean, one day I'll tell them this. I think that the 5 years or older, you can have a power dynamic with somebody younger than you. I don't think age has anything to do with it, is what I'm trying to say. And then again, they have were your parents ever separated or divorced? I make that broader to say were your parents ever like not even together, right? So separated or divorced assumes that the parents were ever married. So I tend to ask people, did your parents co-parent? Did they have a negative co-parenting relationship, or did you have an absentee parent? Okay. So, the effects of trauma, I want to get into something that commonly comes up. That is, how can two people having the same experience process things differently? We all know groups of people, maybe it's you, maybe it's your cousins, maybe it's colleagues or friends that you have, where there are siblings that had the same parents, right? Whether they were alcoholics, they went to prison, they were physically abusive or neglectful. But however, one person in this sibling group did really, really well, and one person in the sibling group did really, really poor. Okay. We all know people that this is, and why does that happen? Well, one of the reasons why they think that's happened, Brunzel, Stokes, and Waters did a great research study, and they found that trauma evokes feelings of helplessness and fear. So, what that experience, if we could put it into words, when that bear jumped out at us, we felt helpless and we felt afraid. We were like, "What are the chances I'm going to survive with this dang on bear?" It's very low, and I don't want to die. Right? That's the fear. I don't want this to be happening to me. What happens when we have two different people experience the same trauma but process it different is that one has agency and one feels helpless. Okay. So by agency, I mean there's something in this that I can do. Again, while your brain is processing and you're saying, can I freeze? Can I? That is agency versus if I'm just standing there going, oh God, oh my God, oh my God. Right? That's helplessness. So I often use as the example, Sierra and I are siblings and our house burns down. Okay. And it's catching on fire. And Sierra's the oldest. Sierra could be saying, you know what? I'm going to get the birth certificates. I'm going to get the water bottles. I'm going to grab my younger siblings. Now, we don't advise this, right? When you're in a fire, you're supposed to just save yourself and get out. But older siblings will never do that. Okay. Older siblings are built to, especially in traumatic households, to take care of their younger siblings. Meanwhile, younger siblings are more likely to experience, oh my God, the house is on fire. We're going to die. Oh my God. Oh my God. That helplessness. What happens is that agency, that sense that Sierra had that she could get the birth certificates, get the diaper bag, get the water bottles, get her young siblings, that turns into something positive that she can then go on and use. That feeling that I did something, I helped, I mattered, that goes on to translate to something positive in her life versus the helplessness that gets people stuck in trauma. Okay. I use this example in my own personal life all the time. I had a mom who probably should have been diagnosed with depression. When I was 5, my father left. She laid on the floor for I don't know how long, my little 5-year-old brain, it seemed like forever. And I went to the kitchen phone, stood on the chair, and her work number was up there. I called off. Can you imagine at 5? I called her job to tell them that she wasn't going to be able to be there. I mean, day after day after day. Now, should a 5-year-old be in that situation? No. But did that give me heck a good verbal and communication experience? Yes. Was I having conversations with grown people at 6, 7, 8? Yes. Because I was nothing compared to what I had been through with my mom. Okay. So it will give you skills. And I'm the oldest. So I had a sense of agency. I was changing my brother's diapers and, getting his milk and his bottles. All of that stuff ended up turning into positive attributes that I was then able to use in the classroom to succeed. But I always tell people, at what cost? I didn't have a childhood, right? At what cost? So yes, I was this perfect student. Yes, I made straight A's. Yes, I got a scholarship to a great private K through 12 school and then a great college, but at what cost? I was also in college getting in fistfights with people because I had aces that were unaddressed and I was a fighter. Okay, so there's a cost to this, even when you're looking at agency versus helplessness. The people with agency are probably less likely to say, hey, I was abused. Hey, I was neglected. That's going to be the people with helplessness because they're going to be the ones acting out. But the people who have agency need help too. Okay. So researchers have linked trauma to various problems in adulthood, including poor health outcomes, mental health problems, homelessness, and crime. Now, how does this relate to grief? Well, think about it. If you have a high ACE score, and then on top of that, you have to experience grief, it is much harder to process grief. Okay. Grief is a collection of strong, often painful feelings that happen after a loss or in anticipation of a loss. It is a process that people go through to come to terms with their loss and find ways to adapt to the changes in their lives. Grief and trauma can intersect, but not all trauma involves grief, and not all grief involves trauma. You could have a traumatic incident that involves grief, for example, a murder of someone in your family or a suicide. Okay. But being a trauma survivor could make it likely that you would stay stuck in shock and then delay the grieving process. You're more likely to go back to that 4F that you're comfortable at and stay stuck there as you're going through grief. Okay. So grief definitely is compounded by a traumatic background, traumatic upbringing. This is another pictogram of the ACEs. And you see at the bottom, the average childhood experiences which then lead to social, emotional, and cognitive impairment. So research has shown that people who experience ACEs are more likely to have things like ADHD. They're more likely to have things like bipolar disorder, even psychosis and schizophrenia. Okay. There are real changes that happen in the brain. Again, think of getting stuck in one of the 4Fs. And then that's more likely to lead to adoption of health risk behaviors because smoking helps to calm my nerves. Okay. Drinking helps me not to be as anxious. So I'm adopting health risk behavior. Perhaps I'm using sex or I'm using shopping, right? Or gambling. These are all things that help me to take my mind off of my trauma, to help me not feel stuck in that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. So I'm more likely to adopt these health risk behaviors, even overeating. Okay. The adoption of the health risk behaviors coupled with the social, emotional, and cognitive impairments then lead to disease, dis-ease, disability, and social problems, right? I'm in and out of jail. I can't take care of my kids. I can't keep a job. I'm putting hands on my partner, all of these things. And then those things lead to an early death. In some studies, they found as much as 20 years different between somebody with a 0, 1, 2, or 3 ACE score versus somebody with 4 through 10 as an ACEs score. I talked about this a little bit before with the epigenetics, but here's a pictogram to show you how intergenerational trauma works. ACEs are literally passed from one generation to another. So having a high ACE score makes it more likely that you'll experience an unplanned pregnancy. Not surprising when we have things like the ADHD brain. We're doing risky behavior. We may be looking for love because of what's going on in the home. These are all reasons why we're more likely to have unplanned pregnancy, teen pregnancy, and experience poverty. Because like I just said, you may not be able to keep a job because you have explosive temper, or you're not following through because you're froze, right? Thereby raising the children in a situation where they're more likely to experience ACEs. This pictogram shows the trauma in the middle, which could be slavery, the Holocaust, the stolen generation. And then on the right, you have what I've talked about before, the epigenetic, biological, chemical changes to your DNA, which are then passed to the second generation. We also have the behavior, like the risk of self-harm, addiction, attachment issues, suicide, heart and liver disease, and cancer increases that are also passed to the second generation. And then because the DNA of the second generation is changed, they then pass it on to the third generation. Okay. So this is the intergenerational effects of trauma and ACEs. Now we're going to watch a movie. This is going to show you, and I know everybody doesn't need this depiction because you may have lived it, but this is going to show you what it's like to live with ACEs. I think, Dawn, I think you have to play it. Thank you.
It tastes like it too.
Mom, I found a match. Instead of eating fruits and vegetables, we eat pizzas and stuff. Because that's all we can afford. Fruits and vegetables are more expensive than pizzas. We last had fruits and vegetables a few weeks ago because we had the money then.
Instant winner. Oh, I got a free donut.
It's true. If you have a bad diet, then it makes you look fatter. Sometimes I yell at myself Because I'm disappointed in myself because people tease me for the way I look. Pizza again! No, I'm just joking.
I'd love if it was a steak or shrimp or lobster.
Don't bring that up.
But you know what? If you use your imagination, it almost tastes like it. Take a bite of a big, fat piece of juicy steak. Didn't work.
My mom can't work and my mom can't drive. And my mom's sick.
When I get really stressed out, I go into episodes. They're like seizures, and I end up in the hospital. And they said my body tries to shut down because I can't handle stress. It gets worse every time. And they said that it would eventually end up killing me.
I worry about her a lot. It is hard feeling like you're gonna lose your mother.
If I wasn't like this, things would be different. If I could work or drive, we'd have more money. Them seeing the way that I am with stress and everything doesn't really help them, because I don't want them to grow up not knowing how to deal with it either. And it scares me to even have to think about that, because I don't want them to be like me at all. I want my kids to be better than me.
So that's what ACEs look like. They look like a child parenting, right? They look like a child knowing way too much about what's going on in the household. Um, Even the way that she spoke, you can see already that she knows how to interact with adults. If you're interested, you can follow up because PBS took children who were living in poverty and they followed them through their whole life. And some of them had great outcomes, some of them not so great. It's called Poor Kids. So to deal with I already mentioned this, but I'm just going to say it again. ACEs lead to negative coping skills to deal with the high levels of cortisol released in the constant fight, flight, or freeze. We may pick up coping skills to make us feel regulated. And I want you to think about when you as CHWs are dealing with people who are dealing with traumatic situations, right? Or grief, or a recent diagnosis of cancer. They are more likely to go back to the freeze, flight, fawn, or flee. They are more likely to pick up negative coping skills that they have adopted previously to deal with their trauma. And this is only going to exacerbate what they are already going through. It's only going to make it worse. They don't see that at the time because these are the tools that they have adopted that make them feel better in the moment. Okay. And it's all relative. So I had a mom once who was pregnant. She had come off of heroin and she wasn't sitting there drinking a whole 2-liter Pepsi. And I said, you know what? You might want to cut back on the Pepsi. You might not want to drink that. You might want to just drink water. She said, I just stopped drinking heroin. I was like, girl, you better drink that Pepsi, right? Like it's all relative. So help your clients pick up positive coping skills that no one has taught them that mirror these negative coping skills. What am I talking about? Smoking. I tell people all the time, do a 4-corner breathing exercise. A lot of times what you get from smoking that makes you calm down and feel better is you leave where you are, you go outside, and then you do regulated breathing. We can do that without the cigarette. Okay. For drinking alcohol, you really want to think about, how do I feel after this? How are you going to feel tomorrow morning? How are you going to feel later on tonight? Have you made poor decisions because you were drunk? And then can we do a tea instead? Right? Can we try a matcha coffee instead? Can we try a latte instead? Replacing those things. Okay. A lot of people who are using drugs, they are self-medicating. So you might want to suggest that you have them go see a mental health professional because they may need medication for some of the mental health issues that have arisen because of their ACEs. Okay. With sex, it could be that they need physical touch. They need to be hugged. They need to be reassured. They need intimacy. So many of us who've been sexually assaulted, we confuse intimacy and sex. This is what my therapist and I talked about yesterday. Okay. The only time that we experienced intimacy was in experiencing sex. So helping them understand that there is intimacy in friendship. There is intimacy if you're having a relationship, but you're abstaining. You can still hold hands, right? You can still cuddle on the couch. And you can keep your self-esteem. You could keep your self-worth. And then shopping and gambling, obviously those have to do with money. So helping your clients understand, listen, you don't have money right now for Amazon. I'll never forget when I first got separated, I was like, how am I going to pay all these bills? And my friend was like, delete your Amazon off of your phone. And I was like, what? Girl, what? But that's how I made it. I deleted Amazon and DoorDash. You'd be surprised how much money you save. Okay. And same thing with gambling. And then overeating. So those of us, who learn food is our friend, food is our companion, food never leaves. Then you have to start talking about the long-term effects of being obese, right? High blood pressure, diabetes, kidney failure. Okay. And the yo-yo effect of dieting. Everybody knows Luther Vandross. He escalated his death by all of the yo-yoing because that is really hard on your heart. When you're 300 pounds and then you're down to 150 and then you're back up to 320 and then you're back. That's what Luther Vandross did. And he died very young. Okay. So we want to talk about, yes, I know for me it's pizza. I know pizza makes you feel so much better in this moment. But is there a healthier option? So now I do cauliflower pizza, or I make pizza at home on a 0-carb tortilla. Okay, it still gives me that cheesy, gooey feeling that I get with pizza without all the carbs, without escalating, my blood sugar, without all those poor things that come from overeating. Okay. And then tools to deal with dysregulation. Oh, I had a slide on this. Tools to deal with dysregulation, grief, and trauma. So again, we are helping our clients to understand that the bad habits lead to negative outcomes. We may not see them today, but they're coming. Okay. So meditation has been, out of everything I could tell you, it is the most widely researched and it has the best outcomes when it comes to repairing people who have been through trauma. So this is outside the scope of this presentation, but there are things called telomeres and there's something called weathering. I said that term earlier. Weathering comes down. It literally wears down our DNA. Okay. And meditation has been shown to grow these telomeres or grow that DNA back so that it can fight off disease. So even starting with a 1-minute meditation, which I do with my CHW class, it's on YouTube. You can just type in 1-minute meditation and then growing your practice from there. Practicing deep breathing. I already talked about the 4-corner deep breathing. That's where I started. It is great for people that are in fight mode because it just gets your brain the oxygen that it needs to make good decisions. Practicing affirmations. So affirmations don't say, I wouldn't say I'm a Black woman. That's not an affirmation. I am a Black woman. But I am enough is an affirmation. Because I tell people all the time, I'm very proud to be a lawyer and a doctor, but that is overkill. That was all about not feeling good enough, not feeling enough and trying to prove to myself and everybody around me that I was enough. So I am enough is one of the affirmations that I practice. So I don't have that feeling that I have to go attain something to make myself worthy of love. We're all worthy of love just because of who we are. There's nothing we need to do to be loved. Seeing people for who they are, not what they've been through. This is difficult as a CHW. So I want you to practice when you are with a client with cancer. I want you to practice not centering your conversation around cancer. Right? Talk to that person like you would talk to them if they had not been diagnosed with cancer. Bring normalcy back to their lives. Ask them what their favorite music is, or what they're planning on doing this weekend. Take the focus off of what they're going through because that's how everybody else in their life is treating them. Everybody else in their life is treating them like they're the cancer patient. You treat them like the person who's battling cancer. Okay? Working on our own trauma, grief, and dysregulation so we don't project them to our clients if we get triggered or re-traumatized. This is a big one. because it is easy to be re-triggered or re-traumatized. Again, our brains are built so that if we see that leaf and we smell that berry, we start expecting the bear. So if you start to feel triggered, the hair starts to stand up on the back of your neck, you have to be able to do deep breathing or walk away in order to regulate yourself so that you're not projecting onto your clients, your children, or your spouses what somebody else did to you. And again, these are called practices because you have to do meditation, you have to do deep breathing, you have to do affirmations, you have to do yoga, you have to do it regularly. So when you need that peace to show up, it shows up. You can't just pull out deep breathing out of the air and you've never done it before, because then you might hyperventilate. Okay. So practice these tools. And then the most important thing I want to leave you with before we get to questions is that when you're dealing with individuals that have high ACE scores, that have been diagnosed with cancer, that are going through traumatic situations, practice CPR. And I got this from my manager when I was at Moms to Be, when I was a CHW, Twinkle French Shockey. Consistency, predictability, and reliability. This is what we were supposed to get from our parents, but too many of us did not get this from our parents. Okay. So when you are interacting with a client, you show up when you say you're going to. You call them on a regular basis. You be a reliable presence in their life. And just by doing that, you will help them recover from the impact of their trauma. Thank you all for being with me. Are there any questions? Let's see. I see questions in the question and answer box. Aisha wanted to know if a PDF file can be uploaded for this presentation. I'm pretty sure that's going to be sent out, right?
Sorry
Devin,
about that. Yes, absolutely. I was muted there for a second. Yes, this is being recorded and will be uploaded to CSC's events page. Tanikka, just quickly wanted to jump in and just to say thank you so much. This truly has been such an incredible presentation today. The information and insights that you've shared with our audience today are without a doubt so invaluable to our community health workers, and I know will continue to help shape their interactions and the care that they provide for people impacted by cancer. So thank you.
thank you.
Like Tanikka mentioned, we do have time today to answer a few short questions. So let's just go ahead and jump right on into those Q&A. I see them pouring in. Tanikka, our first question for you is, how can community health workers help normalize the emotional ups and downs of an experience with cancer without minimizing someone's personal pain?
That's a great question. I always start my processes with people in my life of grief with the end in mind, meaning the last stage of grief is acceptance. The sooner you can get a client to accept where they are and what they're going through, the easier the process is going to be. Because what we do is we thrash, we fight, we try to bargain with God, we do all of these things until we can get to acceptance. But if you can just be a mirror for your clients and say, this is what's happening now. We are dealing with cancer, but you are going to be okay. I'm going to be here with you. You don't ever tell a client that they're going to survive cancer, because everybody does not survive cancer. But I'm going to be here with you through it, and you're going to be okay through this. If you can help get them to that acceptance, then that will really help them with the up and downs. And then it'll help them. Yes, it's going to be painful. Yes, it's going to be challenging. You don't ever minimize or mitigate those things, but you just help them to accept it.
Thank you for that answer. That's really enlightening. Second question for you, another great question. How can community health workers set emotional boundaries while still showing empathy and support to individuals who are experiencing or going through grief?
It's a hard one. So what helped me, I didn't have boundaries in the beginning because I didn't have a CHW certification course. I didn't have anybody to train me. I just jumped in with both feet. And I tried to do everything for all people, and I ended up burnout in the hospital. So what became my mantra, and I teach this to my community health workers, if you can't do it for every client, you can't do it for one client. And that has really, really helped a lot of CHWs. You want to take this client home? You want to take this client's baby home? Can you do that for all your clients? Nope, then you can't do it for this one. Okay, so that will help you to have boundaries. And also keep in mind that where clients are today, it didn't take them one day to get there. So it's not going to take you one day to fix their problem. It's going to be a process of fixing. Okay. And one of the most important things is one person plants the seed, one person waters, but we are not in charge of the increase. We got to give that up. Somebody else has to bring the increase. So you do your part. If it's the seed, if it's the water, you do that. But you back your hands off as far as having to see what happens in the end. That'll really help you have boundaries.
Awesome. Thanks for that. One more question I think we might be able to fit in with the time we have left today. Jenna mentioned, do you have any guidance about how family members can maintain positive communication with one another during navigating a cancer diagnosis?
That's a hard one. I think just communicating is the big thing. I don't think that you have to focus on positive or negative communication because people, when they get diagnosed, they freeze. They just shut down. They can't. I got diagnosed with an aneurysm, and that's when I experienced freezing. Because that's not really how I deal with things. But I didn't know what to do. Like an aneurysm sound like you're gonna die tomorrow. So I just froze. So when you're with that, you want to communicate. You don't have to label it positive or negative. You don't have to label it good or bad. Tell me what's going on. And even if it's something that we think is negative or bad, so what? The big thing is to let that person communicate how they're feeling. And then also the caregivers to communicate how they're feeling. Because too many times I'm not saying how I'm feeling because I don't want to burden that person. They're not saying how they feel because they don't want to burden me. And guess what? Everybody's in their silos. Everybody's in isolation, even though we're all in the same home. No, let's talk about it. The good, the bad, the ugly. Let this be a safe space for us to say what we need to say. Because guess what? You don't want something to happen to that person and you didn't say what needed to be said. Okay. So let's normalize the communication, period. We don't have to put the labels of positive or negative on communication. Let's just talk about it.
I love that. Thank you, Tanikka. Just that open, honest conversation with all people impacted by cancer, whether it's the person with the diagnosis or a caregiver, family member, like you're saying, CHWs really have that touch point with all people who are impacted by a diagnosis. So very, very helpful. Thank you so much. That is the kind of end of our time today for Q&A. That's all the time we have. Tanikka, thank you so much again for joining us today. The information that you shared is so, so helpful. Before we end our time today, we do want to just ask our audience to answer a few short questions through the on-screen poll to reflect on the event today. So while you all do so, see that on-screen poll that just popped up there, I will just highlight a few educational and support services that CSC offers to support all people impacted by cancer, but also healthcare professionals like you all, community health workers. So first off, CSC's CHW Quick Guides are free, quick access digital tools that CHWs can use in the field for cancer navigation. Our two most recent CHW Quick Guides cover cancer foundations for CHWs and improving communication with healthcare teams for CHWs. You can scan the QR code on screen to visit the CHW landing page on our CSC website, where you can access and download our quick guides. You can also download them there in the resources tab at the bottom of your Zoom tab webinar. You can view the recording of our last peer support forum, and then of course sign up for a CHW mailing list to make sure that you're the first to know about upcoming events like this one and new resources for community health workers who are providing that cancer support in their communities. Next up, we have CSC's Cancer Experience Registry. It's a research study that collects information about the different ways that a cancer diagnosis impacts an individual. To learn more or to help an individual participate, please visit our website or the link that's dropped in the chat. You can also join CSC's Grassroots Network to receive updated information about cancer-related issues that are discussed with lawmakers on Capitol Hill. To learn more and to sign up, please visit our website or click the link in the chat. Lastly, CSC has 196 locations across the globe, including CSC and Gilda's Club centers, hospital and clinic partnerships, and satellite locations. To find a location near you, you can visit our website and click Find a Location up there at the top, or click the link in the chat. We do just want to take a moment to thank our sponsors that made this important event possible. We're grateful for the generous support of Merck, Bristol Myers Squibb, AstraZeneca, ASI, Genentech, and the Biller Family Foundation in bringing you this webinar. This webinar was recorded and will be uploaded to CSC's events page on our website very, very soon. In addition to the feedback poll that you just completed, we do ask that you please take a moment or two to answer a few post-event questions that will be delivered to your email inbox after the event, and provide any feedback that can help us continue to deliver valuable education and support like today's webinar to CHWs providing oncology patient navigation in their community. Thank you all so much for attending, to Dr. Price for your incredible presentation today, and have a great afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here.